Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what is going on in chapter 4. And this may not be the same order because the order has been mixed up for you guys. The very first section is los hábitos de comer. And en los hábitos de comer, you are going to listen to the eating habits of Manuel and Aldo and decide whether each statement is cierto or falso. And if the information is not given, you select no se menciona. So for example, it says Manuel desayuna en casa antes de salir para sus clases. If it doesn't mention anything about him eating breakfast, then you would put not mentioned. But if it says, for example, that he eats at a fast food restaurant on his way to class, then that statement would be false. Does that make sense? Okay. They're hard. It's hard to pay attention to what's not mentioned, but I think that they do that because that makes it a little bit higher level of comprehension. It's showing that you really understood what you heard or what you read. So yes, I understand that they're difficult, but you just have to get comfortable with it. And that's actually testing more than your knowledge of Spanish. That's really testing your knowledge of what you're here. I mean, because we could do that in English and it would still be hard. Does that make sense? Okay. Then you're going to label, another one is vocabulary. This one, you do not have the vocab, you don't have a vocab bank, but you can see there's not that many of them. Just make sure that you study your vocabulary so you can list either food items or items found in a kitchen. And for some of them, there could be more than one interpretation, and I know that. So if you get something marked wrong and you think it should be marked differently, then you can always email me and I can go in and manually adjust. And I think the system is aware that there's a couple answers that could work for one or more of these. Also include the appropriate definite article. So you can't just say apples, you want to say the apples. Okay, and be careful if it's something plural. I am manually grading yours, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but that if it's multiple, then you want to keep it multiple. However, if you have like cheese, which you have some of these, like cheese, bread, and steak, those aren't usually made. The plural is, like steak is not, it's not steaks, it's just steak. And bread is just pan, you don't really say panes. Yeah. This is our Friday's test. Yes. So then the next section is match each definition with the correct word. And I'm just double checking because you guys are, I just want to make sure I am showing you the right thing. Okay. And here, this has a drop down menu, but this stuff will all be like, you'll have this on one side, you'll have this on the other, and these will have like A, B, C, D, and you'll be matching A to its definition on the other side. Does that make sense? Okay. The next section is dar or decir. We studied dar. Dar means to do what? To give, and decir means to say or tell. So you're going to read these various sentences and decide whether the person is saying or telling, or whether they're giving. And then there's multiple spellings of each one given. You need to pick the correct one. And we just talked about how dar and decir often take an indirect object pronoun. So you do not want to conjugate or nos and me and me. Those are not your subjects. Those are to whom something is being given, to whom something is being told. So you want to look a little bit further to the left in the statements to find who the subject is. So be careful of that. Okay. Then you've got your indirect object pronouns, which I know we were talking about a minute ago with the activity we had just finished. With your indirect object pronouns, you want to pick the indirect object pronoun that matches the indirect object in your sentence. Because in Spanish, they often use the indirect object pronoun at the same time as they use the indirect object. So you'd be picking which of these words would best match with los niños. And usually you're going to find your indirect object, it's going to have an and then after it is going to be some person mentioned. Okay, and that's what you're looking for to match up your indirect object pronoun. Okay. Que les gusta? Remember, we studied the verb gustar, and we have verbs like gustar. So you will be picking between you'll be given two verbs and two spellings of the verb. So you need to pick the verb that best makes, the one that makes the most sense to complete it, and then the spelling that works. And be careful because, again, with verbs, gustar and verbs like gustar, you're not conjugating the those, etc. That's to whom something is boring. That's to whom something is pleasing. You're conjugating for the thing that is doing the boring. So, a mí mucho la historia de Chile es un país fascinante. So that's going to, interest is the one that you want. And what interests you is the history of Chile, not intereso. I don't interest myself. The history of Chile interests me, so you'd pick interesa. So I can go ahead and tell you for this section, for the majority of them, you're not going to want to pick the one with the O on the end. Okay, so be careful of that. Okay, and there's a little bit, whoops, there's a little bit more. Then here we've got our preterite. This section, you've been given two verbs. You pick which verb best completes the sentence, and then you conjugate it into the preterite tense. Some of these are irregular, but the only irregularities you guys have to know for your test are GAR, CAR, ZAR verbs, and then your stem changers. And don't get confused because just because a verb was a stem changer in the present doesn't make it a stem changer in the preterite, or even that it has the exact same kind of stem change in the preterite. And don't forget that when a verb is a stem changer in the preterite, it only changes for él, ella, usted, and ellos, ellas, ustedes. It doesn't change the same as it did in the present. So just review those. This is another exact same thing. These are all irregulars. These are all CAR, GAR, ZAR verbs. You'll read the sentences below. Pick the CAR, GAR, ZAR verb from the bank that best completes it, and then you'll conjugate. And I think pretty much all of these are in the yo form because that's how these verbs are irregular. So it's just double checking that you know how to deal with these verbs that are regular in their yo forms. Okay. Then you have another preterite section where you read the sentence and the verb's already been conjugated out for you. You just pick the verb that best completes the sentence and that is spelled correctly. And that's it.
So there's two preterite.
Hold on one second.